Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I do appreciate you being with me. I want to tell you, this last weekend, and let me give a little preliminary comment here. I know that the weather that we have just experienced here in southern Oklahoma, when it is compared to the weather in the locations of an awful lot of you folks, is balmy, sunny, almost summer-like. I had some people contact me privately and say, Don, what are you complaining about 15 degrees? What's the problem with 0 degrees? Because where I'm at, it is 20 degrees below Celsius. And it's like, that's your problem. Not trying to be unsympathetic, mind you. But look, I'm not a cold weather person. Never have been. Way back in my youth, I used to go deer hunting constantly, every single year. And I remember sitting in a tree stand many times. One particular occasion, it was 14 degrees below 0. I'm sitting up in a tree stand, wondering, what am I doing here? Well, about that time, a big buck comes along, and I felt really good about it. Yes, I got the buck. So, but my goodness gracious, the older I get, the less I like cold weather. I told somebody just recently, anything below 50 degrees, too cold for Preston. Just don't like it. So when those of you who are in Alaska, Canada, Michigan, Minnesota, and I've heard from almost all those places over the last several days, when you write to tell me what it's like, yeah, well, again, that's your problem. I ain't living there. I'm not sure if there's enough money anywhere to get me to move somewhere where 0 is considered a warm-up. I'm sorry, just not my thing. Okay. Anyway, welcome back. I appreciate you being with me. Now then, we are still we are still examining Matthew chapter 24 and 25. We've been focused on chapter 25, 31 and following for a little bit, demonstrating that this concept of the gathering of the nations is not a reference to a literal, physical, geographical gathering. I shared with you briefly a little bit ago a little bit of a linguistic, word study on the Greek word episynagoge and its cognates, synagogue, synagogue, etc., and of course all of the cognates of that, and how important it is to see the concept. Now, in today's video, I want to share with you how in Matthew chapter 25, the Lord, in telling this, in telling this story, says this: before him, that is, before the Son of Man, who comes with his angels in his glory and is sits on the throne of his glory, then before him shall be gathered all nations. Now, this is a futurist form. It is sunex thesetai, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So it's a future tense of synagogue. Here's what I want you to see. Number one, as I document in this book that I'm currently working on, entitled The Last Day, The Last Hour, The Last Trumpet Resurrection, the word episynagoge, and it's all of its cognates, is an incredibly important eschatological word that is used in the Tanakh as well as in the New Testament. And as I've said before, I want to make it abundantly clear. There are certainly passages in which synagogue or synagogue and cognates refers to a mundane gathering, even a geographical gathering. So I'm not denying that at all. The point that I am making is this, and I documented extremely well. If anything, I go overboard in order to demonstrate it because it's such a powerful and important point. That in the Old Testament and in the New, when synagogue and cognates is used, it is used in such a way, in such context, that forbids any reference to a literal, physical, geographical gathering. Matthew chapter 23, verse 37. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets that are sent to thee, how often I would have gathered you together as a mother hen gathers her chicks, but you would not. Episynagoge, I would have gathered you. Now look, folks, you can look all you want. You can get out your concordance, you can get out your Bible Logos program, Bible Gateway, it doesn't matter, okay? You will not find Jesus ever trying to gather the nation of Israel into one geographical location. Never. And not only did he say that it was his desire in Matthew 23:37 to gather them together, but they refused. He goes ahead in chapter 24 and says that at his parousia, his coming, his erketai, or kitai, I have problem pronouncing the Greek. Anyway, that's the verbal form. The verbal form results in the parousia. Okay? Verb leading to parousia, presence. So in Matthew chapter 24, after saying that Israel had refused to be gathered, Jesus now says that the gospel was going to be preached into all of the world for a witness to the nations. Then comes the end. What would happen at the end? Christ would gather episynagoge, the elect. In other words, those who would accept the gospel, the righteous remnant specifically, of the Old Covenant age. That's the harvest. It's the harvest of the Old Covenant age, ladies and gentlemen. It's not the harvest of all humanity at the end of time. It's the harvest of the final harvest of the Old Covenant world to bring that age to its end, to bring in the unending, everlasting Messianic age. Now, so on the one hand, they refused to be gathered as a nation, clearly not a literal, visible, geographical gathering. So Jesus says, I am going to gather. But who's he going to gather? Not the disobedient, not the rebellious. They're going to perish. But he would gather to gather the elect. Now look, if he did not want to gather Israel into a geographical venue in Matthew 23:37, and as a result of the rejection of the gospel, the invitation into his synagogue, the nation would be destroyed, but the remnant, the righteous remnant, would be gathered. So if that first reference to gathering is not a geographical gathering, then the gathering of the elect is not a geographical gathering. Now, with that background, we come to Matthew chapter 25, verse 32, at which, at the coming of the Son of Man, and in last week's videos, I demonstrated that the coming of the Son of Man of Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following is indeed the coming of the Son of Man, of Matthew 24, 29 to 31, the same coming of the Son of Man of Matthew 16, 27 and 28, the same coming of the Son of Man of Matthew 10, 22 and 23, and every one of those previous references to the coming of the Son of Man is delimited temporally to the first century. So, unless you can prove definitively, positively, and irrefutably that the exact same terminology, the exact same motifs of the coming of the Son of Man with his angels in judgment to gather the nations, etc., unless you can prove that Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following is of a radically different nature from the foregoing references to the coming of the Son of Man in his glory, in power and glory, with the clouds and with the angels and in the judgments, unless you can prove they're different, then that means that the gathering of Matthew chapter 25, 32 is the gathering for the judgment of all men of Matthew 16, 27 and 28, which was to occur in the lifetime of that generation, the people still standing there, and it was to be in that generation, Matthew chapter 24, 31 to 34. That destroys the futuristic application of Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following. That's why I say that when we look, and I understand this is a little bit of recapitulation, but that's okay. How do we learn? By repeating. How do we learn? By repeating. How do we learn? By repetition. So, this gathering of the nations in Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following, is without a doubt the same coming of the Son of Man with the angels in power and great glory to gather the elect in the first century generation. And that means the Olivet Discourse is not divided into two separate subjects, i.e., the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 and an end of time coming at the end of the current Christian age. Now, tomorrow, I'm going to look closer at this word, episynagoge, and how it relates to the end of the Old Covenant age of Israel. I think you're going to find it extremely powerful. Okay? I'll see you on the flip side.